And so I think I'm going to jump in and get started. You've all just sort of heard bits and pieces of my story and my area of interest. I'm going to turn it over to Nan, who I met in San Diego at a conference where we presented together, and like 100 people showed up. I was blown away. And I think we had one of the best presentations at that conference. I won't say, but I think it's going on right now too.
Yeah, I think, well, it's going on at the end of the month. It's, can I mention it? It's the
Sure.
Institute of Violence, Aggression, and Trauma has been putting on a conference in San Diego, the La Jolla area, and in Hawaii for the past 28 years. Mm-hmm. And they study the range of trauma, and they actually have several journals. I'm a blind editor on one of them that they publish scientific studies. So, yeah, and Jackie and I presented at that conference, and there were over 100 people, and most of them were from the military, and that was kind of shocking too, because when I asked people to raise their hands about who was being bullied, almost everybody in the room raised their hands, which is not, it's not really a representation of what the general surveys are out there. They're saying that at least a third of the people experience bullying at some point in their career, and that about 40% or 50% of people have actually been bystanders to this. So that's part of the confusion too. Can really people tell if bullying is happening or not? Because there's a lot of covert sabotage that goes on as part of bullying, and that is not seen by a lot of people. And as Jackie mentioned, there's a lot of types of retaliation that go on that are also unseen. So the covert part of it, I think, is what really gets people going, because then you're experiencing this reality that you can't confirm with other people, and then you have the bully denying it all the time, and that really creates kind of a psychic disturbance in you, because you can't tell what reality is at all at that point. And so you're trying to figure out, am I a good worker or am I not a good worker? Because people over here are saying I'm great, and people over here are saying I'm the worst thing that ever walked through the door. And so this split sense of self starts developing. And I think that's the beginning of the stress, because you don't have any way to really name it. And for me, it was kind of like what they call the frog in boiling water. It took me a while to really understand that I was being bullied in a way that I could not meet my abuser's expectations no matter what I did, right? And that was the point where things really started falling apart for me. So and I don't know if other people on the panel have experienced that or not. So.
Well, I know Jennifer has certainly written quite a bit about the bullied brain. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, because I think a conversation with Jennifer about the neurochemistry and the neurobiology of the brain is an important dynamic of this. And I mean, she's amazing. She's up in Canada. Jennifer, Dr. Fraser, please introduce yourself, talk about your work. I have your book somewhere around here. It's probably, but I'm sure if you have it.
Well, I don't think I have a copy around either, but basically, I think the thing that most just struck me in what Nan said, and I'm just going to cut to first name basis with everyone because it's faster and we've got lots to talk about. But I didn't start getting targeted until I was a whistleblower, and it was a very fine line for me, because I didn't realize that they were retaliating against me because they were pretending that we were all working together. So it was particularly confusing. But what struck me was Nan saying, oh, it starts to make you divide. You start to become a split sense of self. You can't understand if you're good or bad. And your brain starts to galvanize really intensely. You can see people who get targeted oftentimes are very intelligent people, and they're targeted by very intelligent people. You know, we have this sort of mistaken notion that bullying is done by people that lack social emotional intelligence and so on. It's all wrong. They're actually highly sophisticated individuals, and they target talent almost, I mean, not almost always. They frequently target talent. They target others as well. And so what happens is your brain starts to figure out what you're doing wrong. And that is a mistake. what you have to do when you start being maltreated in this way is understand that you're dealing with a split personality, and they are going to infect you with split personality if you don't stop them mentally yourself. Like, as we all know, of all the whistleblowers on this call, all the bullied individuals know that in an institution, when you try to push back, chances are very good it's going to backfire on you, because we have an enormous problem in our society. Military would be a good example, but so would a not-for-profit, so would a school, so would a sport organization. We have a very big problem with institutional complicity, a bullying culture, a culture that thinks bullying and abuse is normal. And as Nan was saying, and as Jackie was saying, we don't have the legislation or even the understanding to, at this stage anyways, to stop it. My goal is to see it stopped, and I think we're getting there. And this kind of a forum is indicative of how we are moving in that direction. I'll give 30 more seconds, just basically the gist of my work. My PhD is in comparative literature. I'm an educator. At heart, I like to teach. I like people to learn and know. So I am on the preventative side of bullying and abuse. I'm not a counselor, a professional mental health clinician, doctor, neuroscientist. I am on the other side of it. And so what I'm trying to do is educate people on what happens to the brain when they are being bullied. Vast majority of people don't know that, and I certainly didn't until 12 years ago when I started researching. They don't know that all forms of bullying and abuse, including covert, verbal, emotional neglect, all of the subtle, remarkably sophisticated ways humans have to harm one another, cyberbullying. It doesn't touch your body, but it can all of it can do significant damage to your brain architecture. It's physical, it's visible on brain scans. And that's the really bad news part of my book, The Bullied Brain. The good news part of my book, The Bullied Brain, which most people don't know as well, is that our brains are innately wired to repair and recover. So we have all these people walking around, all of our young people walking around saying, oh, I've got anxiety disorder, oh, I have depression, I have this, I have that, I have suicidal ideation. It's like, yes, of course you do. Who wouldn't in the 21st century? And you can absolutely get better. You can get all of the evidence-based practices you need. They don't cost a lot of money. They don't cost any money, barely. And you can get yourself fit, brain fit, and push back. So that's the gist of what I do.
Thank you for that explanation. Before I pivot to Ted and Bob, I did want to talk about a little bit about the work that I've done. Not to plug my own book, it is sitting right here for a change. The psychosocial impacts of whistleblower retaliation. One of the reasons I got really interested in this, because of what Nan and Jennifer are saying, is that it was so hard to explain what is trauma in relation to retaliation. So, you know, for those clinicians who have used like a PCL, a PTSD checklist for combat vets, there are some real clear, you know, did you see this? Did you hear that? Did this happen? Did that happen? There's like a really clear checklist of what they consider exposure to combat trauma. And, you know, I'm an Army officer. I like checklists. So I thought we needed our own checklist. And that's when I started researching and reading a lot of the work that some of you that are on here have written and presented. Daniel Roberts on moral injury, and Jennifer in The Bullied Brain, and Nan and I on bullying, and Jode and India. The collaborations are out there. I just felt like we needed to pull it together. And that's where I came up with these toxic tactics of whistleblower retaliation, the gaslighting, mobbing, marginalizing, shunning, marginalizing, devaluing, double binding, counter-accusing, and bullying. And we kind of taken bullying as the emotional and physical abuse, as well as cyberbullying, because as Paul will tell you, a lot of bullying now takes place through bots and online and in this very mysterious way. So I feel like we've needed better ways to get our arms around what it is that we're talking about when we say I've been bullied or I've been retaliated against, and we've needed to really to bring that focus to light. So Ted, I'm going to kick it over to you, and then I know you and Bob have sort of a rapport here, but I'm going to ask you to say a few words, talk a little bit about your own experiences, and then introduce Dr. Bragg.
Sure. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm a VA whistleblower, and you know what I went through, like many of you do, you know, the retaliation that's relentless, the traumatizing effects for me being a retired Marine and combat veteran actually was more traumatic than any combat experience I had. Now that says something. And the reason for that is because the level of betrayal and the moral injury involved is really intense, not to diminish other traumas and people's experiences with PTSD, but I think whistleblowers, you know, have it a notch worse than other people that experience trauma because of the moral injury, as I said, and the betrayal that takes place. And that's exactly what happened to me. Again, you know, I didn't know what was happening to me at first either. Like Jennifer was saying, it was very confusing. Your brain gets confused. What is it? I mean, the gaslighting's so good, you even second guess yourself. And especially when you don't know what's going on and that you're even a whistleblower at first. You're just trying to do something right, you know, speaking up about what things that need to be corrected. And before you know it, you're being thrown under the bus in ways that you're not familiar with. And for those of you that, you know, are going through this, that haven't really been part of this kind of a program, again, I highly recommend Jackie's book. Again, The Psychosocial Impacts of Whistleblower Retaliation, because beyond what she says that's in there, you know, giving names to the things that actually happen to us as whistleblowers, what it does when you are aware of what is happening to you and names are being given to the things, you know, that Jackie was naming, and she goes on about it in her book, and not just what it is, but the impact it has. And so when you're aware of that as it's happening to you, and you're not blindsided by having no clue what's going on, and being familiar with her book and these terms, it is calculated, it is intentional, it is malicious, and frankly, some of the things that they do is outright evil, and it needs to be identified. You need to be aware of it so you don't think you're going crazy. And her book lays that out really well, so there's no question what's going on. And so for me, a lot of what she outlines, you know, the depression, the anger, the rage. For me, I had a pulmonary embolism that almost killed me because of the depression and rage I experienced at first, you know, charging forward and continuing the fight, you know, with all that going on. And I literally, I should not be here. That's how it impacted me up front, and psychologically, you know, it goes unsaid, emotionally, you know, and not just to you personally, emotionally, in the devastation and the depression and the anxiety and the anger, but the psychosocial impacts it has with your colleagues, your friends, your family, isolating, not being emotionally available, the legal battles you get into, the financial devastation because of having to defend yourself, you know. And so these are the types of things that happen. And so I have a book too called Broken Promises that, you know, is available on my website in the chat. And basically, Bob
I feel like we're doing with books.
And the funny thing about that is I get into not just the issue I raised as a VA whistleblower, which had to do with you know, policies that were harmful, that were compromising quality care for veterans and damaging the welfare of counselors as a consequence because of unethical, you know, productivity policies. So I also get into the types of tactics that they used against me, mirroring what Jackie has, you know, in her book. And then I go into the impact on me personally as a case example of what Jackie talks about on a very personal level, which I as a Marine, I didn't want to do it because, oh boy, I started talking about how I was falling apart, and I'm exposing a weakness that Marines don't do that. But I just felt it was important to let it be known that it doesn't matter who you are, and especially Marine, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody, and people need to be aware of it. And I just had to get over my fear of being looked at as I'm weak because I talked about, the impact on me. And so that's had benefit to people too. And so one of the things, and because of all of this, what we decided on the board of Whistleblowers of America is there's a desperate need for whistleblower mental health. And so this is why, for the first time, we are going to have a whole afternoon, Friday, September 13th, dedicated to this very thing involving, energy psychology, and in particular thought field therapy. And I'm proud to introduce Dr. Bob Ray, who's with us here, because he's going to be running that segment, and he can tell us more about that and himself. But I know Bob from the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, which is an international organization that promotes and trains people and certifies people in these various energetic psychology interventions, which have been shown to be evidence-based and frankly, most effective even compared to other conventional strategies. So this will be an approach, and since he's a thought field therapy expert, that's what he will be presenting at our conference to give people, a beginning exposure to that and other things that are available as a resource to deal with their trauma. And Bob has been doing this for over 30 years. He studied with the founder of TFT, Roger Callahan, and he's on the board of directors for the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. So without any further ado, Bob, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you. And thanks for having me here. I feel quite honored by this, because I think the people we're talking to here, the whistleblowers and the people who serve the whistleblowers, are some of the most important and courageous people in our culture today. And they underlie a lot of what I think is so great about our culture, being in America. I'm not a whistleblower as such. I have stood my ground. I spoke my truth to power in different settings, but luckily I've never had people coming after me the way you guys talk about what happens to you. And what I know is there's no question in my mind that this causes damage. Anytime there is violence, I define violence as any time someone is not receiving what they're due. It causes stress, and that stress causes changes in the body and in the mind. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, because the other panelists here are the real experts, and the books have been written. And if you need, for legal reasons, forensic kinds of stuff, to prove that this stuff is real, in that sense, they have done a great service in providing that basis. But what I want to do is just jump into talking about it from a more experiential perspective, which is to say, just listening to what has been said about what happens to people, I immediately start to connect with that pain, that upset, that fear. And my guess is that the others who are listening onto this are already connecting to something that's happened to them in the past. And when you do that, you immediately come into an experience in your body. And that experience is usually not a good experience. And it's one that we try to get rid of in any number of ways. Sometimes we just try to avoid it. Let's just click off and we don't have to think about this anymore. Or let's go have a drink or something like that. But the thing is that there's an easier way to manage that overwhelming experience that we have as soon as we start to click into it. And so I'm going to take you through just the basic thought field therapy crisis tapping pattern. So what I would do is ask everybody to join us. 3 minutes, 5 minutes here. So just think of an event in the past, and when you think of that event, or you call it up, or you recall it, or however you do that, as soon as it comes up, notice what you feel in your body. And I would ask you to just take a second and notice what that feels like. Now, sometimes it's people can't get into their bodies. Sometimes it's a tension in their chest. Sometimes it's an ache. Sometimes it's a feeling in your legs. You want to, whatever it is, just notice what you're feeling. And then, because our most important evidence is our own experience, we're going to ask you just to rate how bad you feel in this particular moment, 0 to 10. 0 being no upset at all, 10 being the worst you can imagine. And of course, when it happened, it was probably the worst that you could ever. It's a lot worse than it is now that you've had some time. Well, maybe that's not true because they keep heaping shit on it. But whatever you feel at this point, you rate it 0 to 10. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is tap on the side of your hand right here, just below your pinky finger, and just tap along and tap under your nose, right on the upper lip. Now we're tapping on meridian treatment points, and then tap the beginning of the eyebrow between the center line and the face in either eyebrow. As we're stimulating these meridian treatment points by a little tapping. We could use needles if we were acupuncturists. Now tap under the eye, right on the orbital bone. Okay. And now tap under your arm, go down about 4 inches, we say with men. With women, we often just say where your bra comes across your ribs there. And then we're going to have you tap under your collarbone. So go at the notch, down an inch, over an inch or so, and then tap under the collarbone. Now, this stuff, tap enough you can feel it, but never hurt yourself. We're not about that at all. Now tap on the index finger between the last knuckle and the bed of the nail, slightly towards the thumb. Now tap under the collarbone point. Now tap on the tiny finger. I know it's the damnedest stuff. The first time I saw it, I said, there's no way that I'm going to do this. Tap under the collarbone. Okay, now that's the first part. So the second part, next part is go between the 2 small knuckles, the ring finger and the pinky finger, tapping there about a ½ an inch towards your wrist. And as you do that, we're going to do 9 things very quickly. Close your eyes for a moment. Open your eyes. With your eyes, look down to your left. With your eyes, look down into your right. Now whirl your eyes in a big circle all the way around and then back the other way. Hum. And hum again. And we just repeat the last pattern we just did. Side of hand, under nose, beginning of eyebrow, under eye, under arm, under collarbone. Index finger, under collarbone, tiny finger, under collarbone. Okay, now stop for a second. And just whatever memory you brought up, however you do that. Some people are visual, they had pictures. Pull it up. Some people have to imagine it. Some people remember a smell or a sensation. Pull it up again and see what you notice now. On that 0 to 10 scale, looking at the upset, how would you rate it now? Now, the expectation is that that will have gone down. Now, if it didn't go down, first of all, let me say, don't worry. What we did there was just the most, it's the simplest thing we do in TFT. And we have a whole range of other activities and tapping patterns we can use to help you. So if it didn't help you, don't sweat it. It just means you need a different tapping pattern or you need another one of the techniques with it. But in most cases, what we find 80 to 90% of the time, it will bring down that level of it's down regulation of the sympathetic system. And you'll feel that in your body, and suddenly things are a little easier to deal with. So if it worked for you, you can always do it again. At some point here, I'll put in the chat links to my website, rlbray.com, and you can find it in there. There's a button that says try TFT, and it takes you through a video of me just doing what I've done. I'll add it in. But the idea here is now that we downregulate that, we can come back into the present moment. This moment where you're among supporting people, when you're in a safe environment right now. And once you come into that, wow, all kinds of things happen. Like your brain kicks in. The top of your brain begins to look at the situation, and for you to be doing your analysis and to do your planning in a way that allows you to stay safe as you can say as you make the choice to move forward in standing your ground. So anyway, that's a little bit of what TFT is. I'm not, you know, the thing is you press the button and I'll just go on forever. And so I wanted to kind of put that out to you. That's if you come to the conference, we're going to do, I'll give you lots of other stuff. This stuff is the best researched thing in the world these days. 200 peer-reviewed journal articles, studies, research, meta-analysis. It's all says it's the way to go to help PTSD of all forms.
And it's, and it's the gold standard of research that's been involved in these randomized controlled studies. So it's not just some case study that somebody's subjectively reporting about. And it's getting more and more recognition. And yeah, it's great. I've used it with veterans when I used to work at the VA, and you know, I could go on and on about, you know, cases that I worked. It was miraculous. Quite frankly, even I couldn't believe it.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and I think we're getting some nice comments in the chat too.
Oh, yeah,
yeah, you might want to check those out. But I'm going to go back to Jennifer, because I think is the energy psychology, is that related to brain chemistry? I mean, what do you think is the active ingredient in what helps us heal? You mentioned that when you were talking earlier. So how do we sort of pivot back into that?
Well, as Ted was saying, when you get betrayed, so whistleblowers in particular, if you get betrayed, and even if you're if you're bullied, if you're betrayed, if you're doing the right thing and you're being punished for committing the crime of telling the truth, your brain is starting to, going back to what Robert's saying, your brain is starting to manifest the PTSD symptoms because it's trying to figure out what the problem is. It's starting to panic. You know, one of the things I say to people is, you know, your lungs are designed to breathe air in and out. That's what they do. They inhale, they exhale. Your heart's job is to pump blood through the body. Your brain's job is to take all kinds of incoming data and turn it into a coherent story and make sense of it. And as one of the neuroscientists that I work with says, your brain's job is to answer the question. If it can't answer the question, so going to Jackie's work now and Nan's work, when it can't answer the question because it's being targeted unfairly and it's being penalized for speaking up, then it degrades all systems. So the energy work is critical in that it is calming down the cortisol, so the stress hormone that's pumping up through brain and body. And this is why Ted would have had a very serious health reaction. That's well documented in the research as well, because cortisol affects your blood vessels and it affects your brain architecture. So it's hitting you on both levels. So for you to have a really hands-on, connect to your body, embodied energy response, like Robert is teaching us, it is critical to come right back into the moment and get your brain back on track. So what you would be doing, if we put it into science terms, is you would be kind of crawling up a ladder out of your, your activated threat response system, your emotional system that's all gotten out of whack, everything's dysregulated. And just by an exercise where you remind yourself, no, I'm in the present, I'm with all these people that are safe. I now need to get back to my prefrontal cortex, back to my thinking part of my brain. My rational part thinks about consequences. I'm going to get strategic now. So in that moment, once you get yourself into what the scientists call rest and digest, you've activated your parasympathetic system, and that's the opposite of your stress system. Once you've activated that, then one of the things people were saying, oh, what's an inexpensive way I can get my brain healthier and back on track, especially if I've been deeply, deeply hurt. One of the ways is, it's like costs a Starbucks coffee a month, is to do brain training. So once you've done your energy work and you've calmed yourself down and you've gotten back into your body and you've gotten into your parasympathetic nervous system, you go online for half an hour, and this is state-of-the-art, like kind of research we're talking about as well. It's got over 100 independent studies done on it, of the likes of, you know, Johns Hopkins and UCLA, and it's being very analyzed as to why does it work. It works based on neuroplasticity. So our brain, someone like myself has been, you know, very severely damaged by what was done to me, and I can go to the computer every day for half an hour. It's no fun. It's like going to the gym for half an hour, and you put in your reps and you do your brain fitness, and you're not good at it. So get ready to not be very good at it, but it's making you train things like your working memory. It's making you train your peripheral vision. It's making you train, processing speed, and all of these different things. This is all the rational, reasonable, hardworking cognitive brain. And the more we put ourselves into that place and we get it back regulated and we make it work hard, the brain is hungry for learning, just like the body is hungry for fitness and movement and being in nature. Our brains get better. You can return your brain, no matter how terrible your trauma has been. Every single one of us, well, majority of us can return our brains to organic brain health. And this is one of the ways to do it. And so I would recommend checking out, it's called Brain HQ, as in brain headquarters, brainhq.com. You can fool around with it. You can read the research. You can look at it and do anything you want with it for free. And then if you think it's going to help you, then it's like $7 a month, half an hour a day. Just follow, I would recommend following Daily Sparks. She will put you on a program. She's the virtual brain trainer. But it's really, it's one of the methods. There's other methods too, of course, but Brain HQ is pretty amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. So I know usually when we get to about a half hour in, we start to open it up for questions. I see there's been amazing comments and dialogue going on in the chat. So please keep posting and sharing there. I always love when I see all the side comments and people connecting up in the chat. Barb, I saw your query about military sexual trauma and wanting to get connected for a new organization. And I would suggest that you look up Daniel Roberts. He's here as well. Dan, I know you're here. I know I've seen some of the other clinicians come on. So before I open it too wide for questions, any of the other researchers, psychologists, psychiatrists, I know there's a bunch of you. I saw names fly by. Anybody else want to join? Go ahead, Nan. I want to hear from the clinicians.
I just wanted
for
to
now.
caution that, you know, we're talking about a lot of really good brain exercises, but really people have to feel safe first before they can do any of this. And that, I think that's critical not to leave out, because if you're in the middle of being attacked, these things won't last you very long because you can't really calm yourself down enough. That's part of what the bully or the people who are going after you in retaliation for whistleblowing are doing. They're trying to keep you upset all the time. So it's important that the first phase of your recovery is to make yourself feel safe, or to get yourself in a safe space, have yourself fully supported by people like Dr. Bray and Ted Whittle and Jennifer. And I think this is really important for everybody to recognize.
Well, and I see Dr. Roberts has come on camera. So I'm going to assume you were going to make some comments and you're going to talk a little bit about your moral injury network.
Sure. Yeah, so just been very listening intently. I'm a little bit familiar with the tapping technique. I have a friend of mine who taught me that, and I've used it. And I think it is a great way to kind of help, like, calm down those raw emotions, get your brain a little focused, and get some clarity. So I think there's a lot of different things, like meditation can do that, or not chanting, that's not the word, but you know what I mean, using these phrases over and over. And what's interesting to me, just switching to my own research, my own work, is that, you know, whistleblowing is definitely, and the effects of it definitely can be a form of moral injury. And so what our organization does primarily focuses on moral injury in service women and families. But we've done some research with about where we've interviewed 50 women veterans about their moral injury experiences. And now we're currently doing a research project where we're interviewing spouses of service members with PTSD. And what we found is that what the spouses have experienced is sort of a collateral damage sort of phenomenon, in that often the service member's PTSD is the result of a moral injury experience, and then their difficulty in coping, their difficulty in, the physiological effects of their experiences and PTSD, and you have some with the women we've interviewed, 20 of them. They were all women. We weren't limiting them to women, but that's just who signed up. And most military spouses are women, but they're dealing with service members with extreme versions of PTSD, if you will, like very frequent suicidal ideation, extreme kind of behaviors, total inability to function in terms of having a job, and in some cases functioning in society at all. And so those are the experiences we saw or that we interviewed about, and for them, for the spouses, a lot of the moral injury had to do with the failure of the military institution to recognize what's happening to the soldier, recognize the strain that was being put on the soldier, and as we talk about betrayal of every military organization has family readiness groups and family support groups, but they don't really serve any purpose other than try to make the spouses feel better about the bullshit their husband has to deal with or their service member has to deal with, right? But it wasn't, a lot of the cases wasn't about just combat experiences, because we understand like combat experiences can be extremely traumatic and has physiological effects. But it was, in many cases, it was the constant deployment. Deploy for 6 months, come back for 3 months, deploy for another 6 to 9 months, come back, move to a different base, so that the service member could then go through a year-long school, and then as soon as they graduate, move again to be a new command, take over a new command in which they work 20 hours a day and were never home. And so they never recover from the PTSD inducing experiences of their deployment. And so what happened, of course, you can't take that out on people at work, more or less, or you get in trouble. So they take it out on their spouses at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I think you're so I think this is an important point to make. We've discussed and we've had other seminars on whistleblower families, and I think that's another impact to wellness, is how it impacts your family and your social system. I know I've had that conversation with some of the whistleblowers that are online tonight that have also had that. And I know Simon is online. I don't know if we lost Jyoti. I was going to ask if she wanted to talk about her research too. Lucy, I think I saw your hand up a minute ago. Oh, Jyoti has rejoined. So I think I'm going to go to Jyoti because I know it's really, really late in India. So I want to give you an opportunity if you're back online. Yes. So Jyoti and I have worked on some research. If you can give like a 2 minutes, maybe, about some of the research that you're doing on whistleblower mental health. And then I know Lucy has a question.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry, it's morning out here. Good evening there. We are doing a research, and I'm located into one of the management institutes in the country. And we have one of these innovative concepts coming in, which is most felt and least discussed. both from the legal parameters to talking about the social processes here. I would like to highlight that it's not only about the society, it's about the culture of the country, which makes it convenient to hide everything under the carpet and to say that, yes, it should be ignored, conveniently overlooked, and you should not even think about it because this is something which has been carried over as a traditional format, right from the Indian families to having that notion for all the daughter-in-laws that go. So a lot of, I'm sure you would be knowing these conventional aspects, which gets transferred from one generation to another. So we are doing the research based on from the students' perspective. Are they aware about the whistleblowers? So we do have a law which came back a decade ago, that is in 2014. But when we have gone for a survey, almost no one, almost no one knows about it, except for one or two cases, odd cases we found, because in that case also their parents, one of the parent is a lawyer, so therefore they have very slight clue, okay, that there is something about it. But if you ask the details, what could be the protection, how can they protest, anything and everything about it, so they know nothing about it from the legal parameters. So therefore we found that yes, Jackie ma'am, I read through the book because I myself being into the similar locality had been facing this problem of going with PTSD, a lot of moral injury. So all that I read through, actually I had gone through. And I could relate so much for whatever ma'am had written. So talking about the imposter syndrome at office, at my workplace, to talking about the peer group in general. So they all were telling me that you are not good enough. No matter the fact that I've been the best of the employee, and that I was preferred by management for all the upcoming roles, something innovative coming into my profile. But I can understand that yes, they also come from the similar family background, and therefore I had been facing this as a chronic stress to me. So, talking about this, not only imposter syndrome, but also a lot of gaslighting, this has actually experienced by me, and I was hunting for solutions. I would reckon with you, ma'am, when you mentioned that we do not feel, our brain doesn't feel safe. So when I talk about myself as a person, it's more about that brain safety and emotional safety, and definitely that social safety. That what will be the consequences if I word out my feelings, emotions? How would I be interpreted, and will I be then socially exclusive? And since we get hurt repetitively because we do not know how to protect ourselves, we unfortunately move towards the protestation of the same. And there's a lot of blame game that starts over. So this is exactly what I experienced. I wanted to share my experiential insights. And having said that, I'm also looking forward to a solution to how to put it across to people that yes, this is the borderline and you cannot transcend because I do not permit you of the same. So the reason why I'm asking this question, because a lot of my students have now been starting to ask the same to me, Jackie ma'am, because once I've been doing this research and I've been asking, do you feel unsafe when you have to voice out any wrongdoing either from your family or from your friends or from your faculty members? They say that yes, we want to, but we have an apprehension the moment we do, maybe they're going to chop off our marks, to talking about that isolation from the family or friends in total. So what could be the way out to communicate what we really want to? So if there could be any suggestion from any of the eminent dignitaries out here.
Yeah, we definitely started, I think, an interesting project together. I think there's so much more work to do. I mean, that's why I don't know if you were on when I mentioned that we're going to be launching a survey after our conference on a global imperative for mental health for whistleblowers. So you'll definitely be getting asked to participate in that and maybe get some of your connections in India to contribute as well. And I think doing that, our Be a Giraffe campaign to talk to young people about understanding this right-doing culture and the fears that people have for doing the right thing, because it is doing, I mean, it sounds crazy, it sounds counterintuitive that doing the right thing is also scary in cultures where there is a conspiracy of silence or a conspiracy of collusion. I'm thinking about Dr. Daniele has been on one of these as well in the past. And it is, it's definitely a difficult path to walk on. And we definitely need to involve more families and more researchers and more lawyers and more judges. We need to make this more of a community conversation. I know Lucy had her hand up for a while. I'm going to let her introduce herself in the way that she chooses and ask her to share. And then I do want to get to Simon.
Thank you, guys. I will definitely be respectful of time and just echo what the last speaker said. I'm a journalist. I've been so for 20 years. And I often exist in the space of being a place where people can exercise their freedom of speech and doing our best always to keep their identities protected in a very professional way. But also in a position where I've also had to speak up within the system that's supposed to propagate freedom of speech and freedom of information. And so exactly what the last speaker just said, as far as, you know, getting into that cycle of you're still so injured of what's happened that you kind of recreate the situation by always exposing your vulnerability as to like where you've been because you haven't reached a point of healing yet, right? So my fast forward question to all of this is when someone's in a state of fight and flight, let's say, where you see the threat before you and you need something to protect you, fix, you know, stop the injury in mid moment, if you will. Is there anything that you all have seen that is sort of like a good like red button to you know to touch to press that kind of, you know, as you would say, kind of stops the clock, that truly is genuine? I'll give you an example of how I mean it. I know that whenever we are as journalists, whenever a judge tries to throw you out of court, you know, you have an article that you can claim and you say, Judge, you know, Your Honor, I, you know, respectfully decline being thrown out of court, and it kind of stops the process. And so I'm not seeing in all my years and all my research, unless there's a genuine person of power, a genuine person of that truly believes in freedom of speech and freedom of information. I don't see it beyond personalities and influence. I haven't found a process yet, if you will, that kind of guarantees safety in the moment.
So Lucy, I see Jennifer and Nan have both raised their hands, so I'm going to pivot to them to answer your question, and then we'll come to Simon, and we're going to get ready to close here because we're getting to the top of the hour already. Go ahead, Jennifer.
And I'll just go first super fast. All I was going to say is, Lucy, you've just described my new book. It's called The Gaslit Brain, and it's called Protect Yourself Against the Lies of Bullying, Gaslighting, and Institutional Complicity. And it's full of neuroscience techniques for ways that we could do exactly as you say, somehow cut through all the noise that's making us incredibly unsafe, and come up with strategies. I saw that Chris has posted in here the book Thinking Fast and Slow. So one of my chapters is, you know, bullies and gaslighters want you to think fast. Here's how to think slow. And I'm using that research. So it's me being a teacher, taking this brilliant research and trying to put it into action and practical application for people.
Nan, over to you.
Yeah, I've spent the last 4 years working on a building better boundaries course, because I felt like for me, that was what was missing. I didn't know how to defend my boundaries. I didn't even really understand my boundaries, and I had them a lot misaligned with what I thought they actually were and what I was actually doing. So I've created something that helped me, that actually has me looking deeply at my understanding of my strengths and weaknesses and my boundaries and how I have aligned them with my values or not. And then how I see trust, because I think that's a really amorphous kind of value that or virtue that we're taught through our families. And sometimes we aren't taught correctly about what trust really is. And then I think there's some principles that are in all of that too, that, you know, you decide you're not going to be a bully back if you're going to stand up for yourself. So there's got to be a sane way to respond to people. And like any warrior, you need to practice those. You need to develop your strategies, you develop your responses, stand on your values and understand where your boundaries are. And then you can say, what do you mean when you say da, 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 right? Because I would just say, in general, bullies and people who go after whistleblowers, they don't have values, right? And so when you bring out your values, they don't know what to do with it. And I've had more, and this works online too, I've had more success with getting people just to like, okay, I'm not going to deal with you, and they leave. And that's been really helpful for me. And so now I'm teaching other people to do that. And I just think in general, we need to go back to understanding our boundaries. And so that's my 2 cents on this subject.
Jackie, I'd like to throw in a 2 cents on this too.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think it's absolutely important. What I'll say to you is, if you feel you're in danger, you are in danger. And you should respect that, and you should trust that, and you should act on that. And it's one thing to say, you know, well, how do I find myself back to a place where I resist it? But if you're feeling in danger, you know what? You need to get yourself safe. Then I would say tap, and then come back with a clear sense of, how do I engage in a way that I and the people I love stay safe? So I just want to encourage people to not feel like there's anything wrong with the fact that you feel that and you just get the hell out, because that's the best step there is to protecting yourself. And I want to say, I just want to say to people who work with whistleblowers, it's sometimes hard to find therapists or somebody to work with. But you don't need a specialist in whistleblowing. You need somebody who understands trauma. You need somebody who understands what it's like. What I say to people is, if you're looking for somebody to help you and you're in one of these situations, look for somebody who has extensive experience in trauma, and particularly domestic violence, because it's the same kind of thing where you're locked into this relationship and you know you got to get out, but it's going to take 7 tries. So there's plenty of people who can help. They just don't know sometimes they can help. So, yeah.
All right, Simon, I know you've been very patient with me, and that's not your virtue.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I'm Simon. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone. It's really great information, and a lot of what has been suggested is techniques that I've used. I mean, I've been a whistleblower in the financial market since 2017, and I've only just managed to get the company I blew the whistle on to trial. So it has been an incredible ordeal. I was a senior manager, regulated person, and a company senior signatory. So it was my obligation to sign off, and the company was committing fraud. And so I refused to sign off, and they retaliated against me. All the things that Jackie said, mobbings, interrogations. But, you know, another big reason was that other people were being injured. And the company was so toxic, I felt it was my obligation to do something about it. But I became the target of really serious retaliation myself. Had a heart attack like Ted at the desk, nearly died on the pavement outside the emergency. I was working in New York. And then when I came back to work, I started to file whistleblower complaints, and the company, you know, this is when they really went after me. I was hospitalized many times, and this continued post-employment for many years. And what happened was, I felt if I had a chest pain, I was having another heart attack, and there's where the PTSD came. And it was, you know, people talk about trauma and they say I'm traumatized, and maybe they have some type of trauma, but real PTSD, it's so debilitating. It's terrifying. It was terrifying for me. I had dissociative seizures, where involuntary body movements, flashbacks, you know, just my psychiatrist, and this is all the suggestions have been great. You know, I've got a really good trauma psychiatrist, really good trauma therapist. He called it amygdala hijack, where part of the brain is getting hijacked and you don't know. You know, I didn't know what I was doing. I could jump out of a car and run through the street. And it was so terrifying. And what I've had to do is, it's all consuming. It's been all consuming, and that's affected my family badly. My wife had a breakdown. What I've had to learn to do is to take my power back. And taking my power back means spending the time on myself, on my recovery, not spending all day working and all day on whistleblower cases and reporting. Is no, I'm looking after myself. And that for me has been doing well. I am a yoga teacher and pranayama breathing teacher as well, which ironically was the most difficult thing to do when you're in the middle of a crisis. As Dr. Nam was saying, you know, get yourself safe. I had to separate myself out. I get up every morning. I'm doing meditation, breathing. I'm doing exercise, working with a therapist. One thing we haven't touched on, which maybe we can do on another conversation, after 7 years, I mean, I've done the tapping therapy. I've done some EMDR, but I haven't been able to do it because I'm still in the middle of it. I actually went and did a shamanic healing, plant healing medicine in a center. There's lots of centers coming up in Europe. I went to Portugal, they're in the Netherlands. This is run by an ex-army vet, and he's treating army veterans with PTSD with ayahuasca. And this is in 3rd stage trials in Imperial College in London. They're using psilocybin, these kind of treatments. For me, that has been the most profound experience. It's pressed the reset button for me, and then it's facilitated the other techniques, you know, in being much more effective because I'm in a better place to heal. So everything, all these other treatments, having done this plant medicine, I mean, I can't describe what it did. It basically told me what I needed to do, and I had 3 ceremonies by a shaman and a qualified practitioner. He was also a doctor, a nurse, a medical nurse, and it taught me how to get out of the rage, to bring integrity to my case, to not be firing from all directions and just raging at everyone. And it taught me that in it all, I tried to defend and protect my family, but actually what I was doing was hurting them. Because I was so desperate for justice and vindication and almost, I guess, revenge, because these people were so horrific what they did to me and other people. I wanted revenge, but that was the anger kept me locked into the pain and the trauma, and it showed me that I needed to let go of that, and I'd been hurting my family by doing that. And since I've done that, I mean, I'm not saying you have to do a shamanic healing, but to get into a better place where, out of the rage, out of the anger and the resentment and the revenge, that's the way to get through this. And spend time on yourself. Make sure you prioritize yourself ahead of everyone else. Getting the oxygen mask first. Yeah, that's my experience, but it's been incredible, and you know, I can only just reiterate everything everyone said on the panel. It's those are incredible techniques. They do work, but get yourself safe first of all. Definitely get yourself safe. Thanks,
Simon, thank you. I mean, I don't know that if anybody else could have said that any better, and that journey that you described, just so powerful. Honestly, I remember the first time I talked to you and we got off the phone, I was exhausted. I had you wore me out. Right. I was listening and it was so fast, and just how much calmer you are and centered and focused. I'm so pleased with you and where you're at, and I think we get and we could probably do a whole nother hour on that. I call it frozen in fight mode, that fight, flight, freeze. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. You can get so frozen in fight and everything becomes a fight that you don't give your brain, your body a chance to rest, and you don't get a chance to enjoy, and then they win, right? I mean, the lesson of the Nazis is when they teach us nothing. That if we don't learn to own our own narrative, I think somebody said it a little differently earlier, but I call it owning your own narrative. That's restorative justice. And until we take over and take control of our own story and our own life, and we don't give anybody permission to control how we feel or how we react, that we stay centered, that we stay focused. I think, I think there was a point you made earlier about this goes on for 7 years, or this has gone on for 10 years. These cases go on. It would be like a combat vet trying to heal from their post-traumatic stress when they were still in the middle of their traumatic stress. And I mean, I think there are some techniques that work when you're in the middle of it, but it's very hard to treat PTSD when it isn't a P, that it's still a current level of stress. And I think these prolonged exposures and trying to heal in the middle of an exposure while these things, they come up and they cycle, it may take a year before a court case comes up, and then 6 months for discovery and another 6 months for depositions. And so these cases go on, and there are so many opportunities for triggering and re-traumatization. So I really, as Simon, bless you from the bottom of my heart. And so grateful that that you're in the UK and you took the time to join us. I'm so excited how many people tonight I've seen have logged in from other countries, from other institutions. There's quite a few very, what I would consider very serious, knowledgeable clinicians and practitioners that have been listening. I'm grateful for everybody who's logged in. I'm going to close with a reminder that the Workplace Promise Institute is coming up. The 12th and 13th will be in Washington, D.C. Very grateful to the American Legion, who is hosting us in their facility on K Street. We will also, of course, be live streaming and recording to make this accessible to as many of you as possible. As Dr. Bray has mentioned, he will be back. And we'll be doing more tapping, more energy psychology, more learning. And when I've had a chance to breathe after our conference, I'm actually going to go to the ISTSS conference, the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies. To my shock, they accepted a poster on whistleblower retaliation as trauma. So yeah, I was like, oh, they're the big kids, or mostly psychiatrists that go to this meeting. So the fact that they accepted a poster was a huge. They've let the nose of the camel under the tent, as we say in the Army. So
hey, Jackie, we need to get that in the DSM-5.
I'm working on it.
That's right.
That's why I want to be around
retaliation.
They're the ones who write it. We'll win so many more court cases if we could get the word retaliation into a mental health, either in the ICD-10, because don't worry, the World Health Organization's on my list too. But if we can get the American Psychiatric Association, who publishes the DSM, to give us some acknowledgement about retaliation as trauma, and to get the ICD-10 to recognize, although there is a real big difference between how the DSM and the ICD describe trauma. The serious injury idea of the DSM, where we fight in court over a serious injury, is being punched, slapped, kicked, as opposed to emotionally abused. And the ICD-10 language on being threatened and feeling threatened is very different. So we have to figure out how to maybe merge some of that understanding. So I think one of the reasons I'm going to launch this mental health, whistleblower mental health consortium, is because I want to get some of the organizations to come to the table, get engaged. Let's have this conversation, and let's see who can move the needle. So I'm going to be tapping back into some of the clinicians and some of you with real contacts in the mental health community to join this effort, and maybe we'll see some progress. But hopefully I'll see some of you again in another few weeks, and we will continue these conversations. Please still continue to share any contact information in the chat. Send me a note if there's something in particular you want to follow up with. Just remember, we're getting ready for a big conference, and hopefully we will connect soon. There will not be a roundtable in September because there is a conference, but we'll work on getting an announcement out for October. So thank you to our presenters and everybody who participated, and I will see you soon. Have a good night or a good morning.
Thanks so much.
You take care.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.